In this video, we're going to look at the best settings for portraits for Sony Alpha cameras. Portrait photography is one of the most common reasons people will buy a new camera, but getting good results can be tricky. Sony cameras are good all-rounders, very capable of good portrait photography. And in this video, we'll look at the best camera settings and other tips and tricks you can use to improve your portrait photography. I've got lots of other videos about tips and tricks for Sony Alpha cameras on the channel, such as videos about wildlife photography and landscape photography. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, please consider subscribing to the channel, and if you're enjoying, drop a like on the video. So first we're going to look at what lens to use, and for a lot of you, the only lens you might have might be the 16 to 50mm kit lens. Well, that's okay, because it is capable of taking portraits both indoors and outdoors. But generally, for good results for portrait photography, you want to be looking for a lens with a wide aperture, and this is the f or f-stop number on your lens. So for example, for the kit lens, at its widest, 16mm, the f-stop number is 3.5. However, a fixed focal length lens, such as the Sony 50mm, might have an f number of f1.8, for example, and f1.8 would be ideal for a lot of portrait photography. The lower the f number, or f-stop, means that there is more light being let into the lens because the aperture is wider. This allows for brighter images with less noise, perfect for portraits. The aperture, or f number, is also tied to depth of field, which basically means blurrier backgrounds. Blurry backgrounds can be very desirable for portrait photography, as it helps your subject, the person, stand out a lot more, and the background, well, goes into the background more. So the basic rule is the lower the f-stop number, the blurrier the background will be. If you narrow the aperture, which is the f number rising, so all the way up to f22 is common on a lot of lenses, will mean that most of the image will now be in focus. So if you want the subject of your portrait photography and the background in focus, you would raise the f number to achieve this. To shoot your portraits and manually be able to control your aperture, please shoot in aperture priority mode, which is the A mode from the shoot mode options. Then you can turn the function wheel to adjust your aperture. Here you can see the f number going up and down. Focal length is also important on your lens when taking portrait photography, and this is represented by the millimeter value on your lens. The lower the millimeter value on your lens, so let's take example the kit lens, the lowest is 16mm, the closer you'll need to be to your subject to be able to take the photo. But this will also mean being closer will exaggerate your subject's features. So for a person on a portrait, this can make noses and lips look larger. So if you zoom in more, which extends the focal length and raises that millimeter number, the further away you'll need to be from your subject to keep them in the frame. Shooting further away has the advantage of removing this exaggeration of features and making faces look a lot more natural and probably fit a more classic portrait look. So personally, a great sweet spot for me, where you don't have to be too far away from your subject, but you don't get those exaggerated features, is around 50mm. This is achievable on a zoom lens just by zooming to 50mm if that is an option, or using a prime 50mm lens like the 50mm f1.8 I mentioned earlier. Now for indoor portraits, 50mm might not be achievable, as due to space restrictions, you might not be able to get that far away from your subject. So if you're going to be doing a lot of indoor portraits, then maybe 35mm would be a good focal length to try and hopefully not get that distortion of facial features. So for example, a pretty similar lens would be the Sony 35mm f1.8, so that you're still getting those nice bright images. Another setting I'd recommend for portrait photography would be using the AFS focus mode, which stands for Autofocus Single. Autofocus Single locks the focus to a single point on a stationary subject. So for portrait photography, your subject probably isn't going to be moving around too much, so you can lock the focus by half pressing the shutter and then take your photo perfectly in focus. If your subject is going to be moving around, you want slightly more dynamic portraits, then maybe you could use the AFC, which is Autofocus Continuous, so that you can track the focus of a moving subject. If you'd like to see a full explanation of focus modes and how they work, you can check out this video here where I go through it in more detail. Another quick setting that you can use to enhance your portrait photography is IAF, which stands for Eye Autofocus. Eye Autofocus will allow you to fix focus on your subject's eye while you are shooting. Perfect focus on your subject's eye is a great way to make your portrait photography look more professional, and you can relate to it more as it's usually the first place that your eyes are drawn to is looking at someone's eyes. And the autofocus on Sony cameras is pretty good, but it usually doesn't jump straight to the eye. To set up eye autofocus, you'll need to assign it to a custom button. This can be done under Custom Settings, and then go to Custom Key Settings. Then choose the button you want to use for your IAF. Then select IAF from the list of functions. Then when you're shooting, hold down the button that you've assigned IAF to, and you'll see the eye focus lock, and then you can take your shot. Other quick settings that I'd recommend would be just to keep ISO on auto, and this will automatically adjust the light levels for your camera. And I also find keeping the white balance settings on auto is fine for portraits. Both of these settings can be found in the camera settings menu if you want to check if they're on auto or you want to adjust them. Finally, I find shooting portraits much easier outdoors due to natural light, and if you can, I would recommend shooting in golden hour, which is either an hour before sunset or an hour after sunrise. That way you get a nice warm glow from the sun, which makes your shots look really nice and soft, and it gives you this kind of really nice professional look that you'll see on a lot of portrait photography. Shooting at this time takes away a lot of the hard work, which is making your portraits look good, and the lighting is such a big element of that. So if this is an option for you, try and get outside and shoot your portrait photography. Of course, shooting outdoors isn't always an option, and you might want to shoot indoors. So here you'll have to just try and control your lighting as much as possible. Try using as much natural light from windows and try and get an even distribution on someone's face if that's the type of photography that you're going for. Also consider using softbox light or other lighting which isn't too harsh and that you can kind of distribute across your subject, and I think that will help you get much better results for your portrait photography. So there we have just some quick tips for Sony Alpha cameras which will help improve your portrait photography. Are there any settings that you use for portraits that I haven't mentioned? Let me know in the comments below. But if you've enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel and dropping a like on the video. And if you want to check out any of my photography, you can find it on Instagram at aaron.prescott. But that's it from me for now. Until next time, see ya.